Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to IMR's first webinar of the year, and how happy we are to be bringing you these valuable insights. This morning, we are delighted to be joined by Anthony O'Riordan, who is the Managing Director at Kaizen PLM, Rodrigo Fraga, who is a pre-sales consultant at Siemens Digital Industries Software, and they, together with IMR's own Jay Roster, will be delivering today's webinar on product innovation through lightweighting with additive manufacturing. If you have any questions for any of the speakers, you can use the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen, and we'll have time to get to them at the end. But for now, allow me to hand over to our first presenter. Welcome, Anthony O'Riordan.
Thanks very much, Gary. I'm going to start the webinar by just giving a quick introduction to Kaizen PLM and letting people know who we are. So Kaizen PLM, we are a Siemens industry software partner founded in Ireland 8 years ago. We sell and support a range of CAD, CAM, 3D simulation, PLM, and industrial IoT software solutions. So almost any type of software that an engineering company would need. And while we specialize in a few key areas such as additive manufacturing and virtual commissioning, we were actually the first accredited expert partner of Siemens globally for additive design, simulation, and manufacturing software. And we often work with Siemens in their direct accounts to support those additive design and manufacturing software deployments. We are all mainly engineers at Kaizen, and we use these software tools day in and day out. So just to give you a quick overview of what we will cover today, we are going to start the webinar by giving you a very quick overview of our digital engineering workflows, and then I will jump into some quick real-life examples of part lightweighting. Jay from IMR will then take you through a landing gear torque link design, which Kaizen PLM recently provided to IMR. This was actually printed by IMR on their Renishaw powder bed fusion system. And we're definitely saving the best for last, as Rodrigo Fraga from Siemens will be delivering a story on topology optimized robot grippers, which Siemens have recently commissioned, and they're gaining some popularity in industry as well. So what are the barriers really to industrializing additive manufacturing and digital lightweighting technologies? As we talk with companies across industry, one barrier to industrializing additive manufacturing or digital lightweighting is the reliance upon point solutions for much of their design and manufacturing process. This becomes a problem because the use of multiple software systems from multiple vendors means reliance upon neutral file formats that don't contain any intelligence. This disconnected process chain means that the final workflow from design to manufacturing is almost untraceable, and it makes it difficult to certify the products manufactured. It is very difficult to ensure that the proper data is being transferred between each step of the workflow when that data isn't tightly managed in a single system. To truly get the best return on investment from additive manufacturing or any digital engineering workflow, the design, manufacturing, and quality processes must be part of a holistic digital manufacturing workflow. Such a workflow allows for design data to be simulated, prepared, printed, machined, inspected, and quality controlled, all within the same software system. This is the type of solution Siemens and Kaizen work on, and the type of solution that we deliver to our customer base. So where do you use part lightweighting? Typically, part lightweighting is used in high performance applications. Any engineered application which needs to move or be moved, lightweighting can also benefit. You can quickly design parts which are optimized for lightweighting with the latest digital engineering tools, such as Topology optimization. Topology optimization can optimize parts to have a minimal mass while maintaining a defined strength, a defined safety factor, and a defined durability. It's a tool that enables engineers to get to the final design much faster. Topology optimization isn't just for 3D printing. It can be used for parts that will be cast, molded, machined, forged, or formed. Basically, topology optimization tells you where you need to put material and how much of it. But you will often see the most exotic topology optimization examples 3D printed in exotic materials for the latest hypercar or spacecraft components. And talking about hypercars, that brings us on to our first application. So most of you will have heard of Bugatti, a French manufacturer of hypercars. Their Chiron sports car is the most powerful and fastest production car in Bugatti's history. It can go from 0 to 400 kilometers per hour in just 42 seconds. So they need to keep it light. So Bugatti was looking for a way to reduce the drag on its rear spoiler while producing a lighter assembly. Their solution was to create a dynamically moving spoiler that employed the best of additive and CNC components, and they employed a wide range of Siemens software solutions to achieve this. SimCenter was used for aerodynamics analysis to optimize the shape of the rear spoiler and calculate the forces that will be exerted on the brackets when the car is traveling at 400 kilometers per hour. Siemens NX was then used in the same environment to optimize the topology of the parts. A closed loop process for additive manufacturing was then used, where the parts were printed and machined within the same software environment. So here's an image showing the results. On the left, you can see the 3D printed metal shuttle assembly, and on the right, you can see the traditional CNC machined variation. You can see the difference between the two shuttle systems, and this requirements-driven hybrid solution was developed 10 times faster than Bugatti's normal innovation process. And it resulted in an assembly that was half as light as the original assembly, with dramatically reduced aerodynamic turbulence. So another example of part lightweighting with topology optimization software uses a different type of additive manufacturing. Wire arc additive manufacturing, or directed energy deposition. So that's a method that allows robots or gantry-based machines to print big metal parts with complex shapes quickly. Big Metal Additive is a US company, and they're a large-scale metal additive manufacturing machine maker and service provider, which mainly uses wire arc additive manufacturing technology. They have an integrated software workflow. They produce high quality, large industrial scale parts. They make parts 12 by 12 foot and bigger. And what makes Big Metal Additive stand out is its high deposition rate. In one project for the military, Big Metal Additive was challenged to assess whether it was feasible to use their machine to build a cargo transport near its point of need. They wanted to see if they could do this faster and with less materials than the conventional manufacturing methods. So Big Metal Additive, they used Siemens NX CAM to program their machine. Siemens NX CAM develops all of the tool paths to lay down the metal and controls the deposition head. And the end result was a cargo transport with the passenger seating base you see in the image that was built from a 70% smaller bill of materials and with an 80% faster lead time. Leveraging a part design that could have never been achieved without large-scale additive, and a part design which was automatically generated by the software via topology optimization. Siemens, Kaizen, and our customers are designing and printing real production parts that go into safety critical products. The results are very impressive. The parts are often made in less time, they often perform better, they often weigh less, they're often more durable and easier to maintain. And the key to getting the correct part performance is having a suitable application backed up by a suitable design and digital manufacturing software workflow. Here we can see how a gas turbine burner component has been redesigned to reduce 13 parts to 1 part. The part consolidation process also means that the part benefits from a 22% weight reduction and a significant reduction in lead time. So these are the type of things that are possible with lightweighting and digital manufacturing workflows and additive manufacturing. Now, I'll pass over to Jay from IMR, who will take you through a part IMR recently printed for Kaizen PLM.
Anthony, for sharing with us those enlightening examples of lightweighting. My name is Jay. I'm a researcher in additive manufacturing here at IMR. And I'm going to bring you guys through an example that we did with Kaizen, a case study around the torque link. Okay, so first of all, what is a torque link? Well, a torque link is a piece of the landing gear assembly. Okay, so we have a look on the image on the left here. You can see that we have what we call the external cylinder and the internal cylinder. Okay, and we can see these two pieces that attach diagonally to each other. They essentially try to stabilize the rotation of the internal cylinder relative to the external cylinder when the landing gear is in action. So if we have a look on the right hand side here, you can see a GIF of the example where the red represents the external cylinder and the green represents the internal cylinder. And you can see that these two linkages here, they prevent torsion occurring there. So that's what we call a torque link. Okay, and we have two of these and they look initially a little bit like this. Okay, so what does the overall process look like for topological optimization? Well, we started off with our initial design. Okay, so we've already seen where that came from in the assembly. From there, we then look at the requirements, both the loading requirements that are applied to the piece in use and any documentation standards from governing bodies, what have you, that relate to performance of that part. Okay, and then we run a process referred to as topological optimization. So topological optimization is essentially a series of simulations similar to this, where each one iteratively changes and updates the design until you hit an optimal solution. Okay, so by optimal solution, we mean the minimum amount of material left in that part that can still reach the performance standards that have been set by the user at the start of the program and taking the safety factor into account. From there, then we look at doing what we call design adaptation. Okay, so the initial result can be a little bit raw around the edges. You can end up with extra edges, extra surfaces, errors in the surfaces that become difficult to manufacture. So with design adaptation, we look at this initial design and we either look at editing the design, okay, so taking this part in and editing it so that it can be manufactured, or we may design something around this initial design. Now, when we talk about design for additive, which is the focus of this topic, usually we will augment the design that's been spat out of the topological optimization. And what we've been looking to do is we'll be looking to smooth down some of the curves, and we might adjust some of the surfaces to ensure that they are manufacturable, add some self-supporting features into the device if needed. Okay. From there, then we take this adapted design and we run it through a process called validation, where we essentially rerun the simulation that we ran at the start and see that the adapted design can match the performance of the initial design and the standards. Okay, we may have to jump back and forth between these phases a couple of times until we get the validation right. From there, then we look at preparing that for printing. So that'll be looking at the orientation within the print bed, setting up all the print parameters of the printer, and adding support structures to the print as needed. And then before we send the part to be manufactured, we also run a distortion simulation where we look at the thermal properties of the material, the heat that is being put into the material during the print process, and ensure that no hotspots occur that may cause a defect to occur in the part, a failure to occur mid-print, or distortion to occur to the part post-print. And then the final stage is to set that part to be manufactured and post-processing. slide, folks, I'm going to talk you through a little bit about how the topological optimization process works. Okay, so if you have a look at our part, we call this the design space. Okay, and that refers to a simplified version of the part. What we've done is we've actually removed some of the main features from the part, which is specifically these cutouts, and we've left in the features that are really important, which is the linkages. And then we've created a boundary as well, so that we say that no material can be added outside the footprint of the original part, because this part has to go back into an assembly that already exists. Okay. From there then, with those constraints in place, what we do is we run iterative simulations where the material in this design space that has the least force or stress going through it is removed iteratively and iteratively until we reach a solution where no more material can be removed without compromising the structural integrity of the part. So what that looks like then, well, we have a look here, this video then will show where all of these solutions are. So each of these design cycles represents one of those iterations of those simulations. And when we turn the simulation view on then, so when we look at that then, we can see that the red represents the material that is kept and the blue represents the material that is removed from that. Okay, and if we change the view on that then, just give it a second to spin it around again for us. What we'll see is when we change the view, we can see what the actual material that's left looks like. And there we are. This is the raw result from the simulation. Now, we can see that the surfaces are quite noisy on it. So what we do is we apply a smoothing filter to that. And then we export this body back into our CAD model, where we can look at doing some adaptations to it then. Okay, so what do we do next? Well, we can see that we've got some sharp edges on this part, which might cause some stress concentrations. We've also got some some rough areas on the external surfaces of the part as well. So what we're doing during the adaptation phases, we're going to smooth out those surfaces. We're going to maybe remove those sharp corners, and we'll try and remove any corners around the linkages as well to prevent stress concentrations occurring at those points. Essentially, we're just adapting that model, and then we'll make sure that all of the areas within this part can be 3D printed. Okay. From there then, what we need to do is to run a simulation, a validation simulation on this part and ensure that this part is meeting the performance standards that we had from our other part. And what we can see from the results of the simulation is it does. We're seeing that the maximum displacement is 0.33 millimeters, which matches up with the initial simulation that was carried out at the start of this project. But what we're also seeing is the total mass of the product is now coming out at 0.51 kg or 510 grams versus the original design, which was 920 grams. And we're seeing that about a 45% reduction in weight. And while that 45% represents a 420 gram reduction in weight for this component, first we have to take into account that there are two of these components in the assembly. And second, then we think about the entire plane as a whole assembly and all of the other components that can be optimized. And very quickly we can see that those little weight reductions can stack up across an entire airplane, and particularly if we take in the lifetime of that airplane into account. What we can see is substantial reduction in weight for the airplane, which means substantial reduction in the cost of transporting that airplane and a corresponding reduction in the cost of, or in the amount of fuel that is being consumed by the plane when it is moving. So the final phase of this project then, before we look at manufacturing, is the distortion simulation. Okay, and again, what we're really looking for here is any indication that the print might fail. So as we don't want to have to rerun the print and we don't want to damage our machine. And also any indications that the part itself might contain defects or might distort during printing. And if we see those, we can make adjustments to the design and rerun this thermal simulation prior to manufacturing. And that will save us the cost of any material that is wasted or any damage to our machine. So final slide here just shows you our final parts manufactured. And what I'll do now is I'm going to hand you guys over to Rodrigo, and he will give you a example of a robot end effector, which is really, really exciting. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you very much, Jay. So hello, everyone. I'm Rodrigo Fraga. I'm a pre-sales consultant from Siemens Software Division based in Belgium. So it means that I work on different projects with different customers when it comes to simulation solutions and additive manufacturing capabilities from Siemens. And today I'm going to present you some examples about how we can use additive manufacturing on robot grippers. I want to start with maybe not so fair comparison here between nature and engineering. So if we see how much weight like an ant can carry, it's impressive, like up to 70 times its weight. And when we compare this with robots, which are quite big and usually heavy system, we see that the robots can carry a very, very, very small amount of weight compared with the machine's weight itself. Because we have to involve everything here. It's not only about the robot arm, but we need to take into account the foundation, the base for the robot to be attached on. So all the pneumatics, electronics, actuators, sensors. And for sure, if you want to carry something, you need a gripper. So it would be the interface between the robot and the part itself. When we check why to, let's say, start working on a gripper, for example, we see that, it's about the weight that we want to move, absolutely. But considering that we are not going to change the component itself, we have our robot, let's say we have our system, we are not going to change the system as well. So the gripper, I would say, it's the first option that we can start investigating, how we can make this gripper more efficient. More efficient means to maybe reduce the mass. You see that this is going to cause a very high impact on energy consumption, for example, CO2 emissions as well, as you see here on this slide, but also brings some more benefits, So if I make a gripper lightweight, I can maybe carry more weight. My robot will support more weight, or I can even get some benefits, reducing the size of this robot to a smaller one. Let me show you a first example here. So if you see on the left side, a part here, so an interface, let's say a gripper made by aluminum with a bit more than 4 kilograms in total. So then you see the different steps, adapting the design for additive manufacturing in polymer in the first moment, not going to, let's say, redesign the part, but just doing some small adaptations. It was already possible to reduce the weight a little bit, to reduce impressively the costs by 80%, and also the lead time, which is super important. But once we start to evolve, on the development of a new gripper, a new part, not only adapting anymore the shape for additive manufacturing, but starting to, let's say, incorporate the parts, let's say to build one unique component, we start to get some more benefits out of that. If you see here, so from this design, we started to put together all the parts. So before it was a small assembly, so we reduced it to 2 parts, then 2 parts steel, so then one unique part, printed in aluminum as well. So cost reduction about 25%, weight reduction much better, lead time as well. But then we identified that, okay, why not to print this part in polymer instead of aluminum? And then it works. And you see that the benefits are extremely, extremely relevant here. So cost reduction of 99% in total, lead time of 3-4 days, depending on the machine you have, on the technology you're using. So it's just an example to start our gripper story here. And you can see how additive manufacturing can make your grippers or your products much more efficient. Some more information about why to use additive. So when we start to think about lightweight, we are talking about, precision tools or components where every gram is important. And when you use simulation, like topology optimization, for example, to guide you to discover new designs, usually you will end up with a very organic and complex shape. So shapes which you can only produce using additive manufacturing. So for sure, you have to adapt this shape depending on the process, depending on the technology you're going to use. But usually those shapes are impossible to produce with any other traditional manufacturing method. So additive, it's very important as well when you start to work on, let's say, specific components. Like you have a high number of variants. So you think about how to individualize these components, and additive is perfect for that. So you don't have a massive production, but like in the case of a gripper, for example, the same thing, depending on the component you want to move, depending on the robot interface you have, you will adapt that design for that very specific situation. So this makes also very easy to deal with spare parts. So if a gripper breaks, you just print a new one, or partially a new one, decreases the lead time that you have to produce a gripper, as you saw the previous example. And once we start to make things lightweight, consider different materials and so on, so we start to get, let's say, benefits on the performance of the system, like we can think about to use smaller robots. And for sure, we have a very, very high impact on costs and CO2 emissions. So it's not only about a component, when you start to do, let's say, part identification, or start to think about where you can apply additive manufacturing on your components, you have to consider the system. Maybe the cost savings that you are going to have for that specific component, it's not so big, but the benefits that you can get through the whole system are more significant. So talking about this battery gripper here, you see a very interesting example as well. So originally this gripper was composed by an assembly of more than 30 different parts made out of aluminum. And redesigning the part, adapting the design also, and considering a new material, in this case, the nylon PA12, it was possible to reduce this assembly from more than 30 parts to only 5 parts. The weight reduction here is impressive. It's from 47 kilograms to 2 kilograms only. So you are saving 45 kilograms only with the gripper. And also you see reduction of more than 90% of the CO2 emissions. So one thing which is extremely important when you work on a production plant, it's like the lead time of components. And in this case, the original gripper, let's say, had a lead time of about 1 month. And with a printed one, you can have this in 2 days, considering that you have a post-processing time and so on. So if you have to adapt something, if you have to change something, the reaction is much more faster. You don't have to stop your machines on your production site for a quite long time, just waiting for a new component, waiting for a new gripper and so on. So it's easier to adapt, it's easier to make things different. So you see, with this kind of, let's say, redesign, we are not only able to save energy costs, lead time, CO2 emissions, and so on, but it's possible to change the robots that we are using. So once the change of the gripper impacts on a possible change of the robot, you can start to rethink about the layout of your plant as well. So small robots means more robots on the same space. So you increase the production of your line probably. So as I said again, you can, just zoom out, see the big picture of your whole process, and take into account that one component can impact a lot during the whole process. And I want to show you, take this example of the battery gripper to show you how our solutions from Siemens can help you to develop these kind of components or any other kind of components on an integrated way. So starting from the concept of the component itself into the production. First step, as Jay already said previously, it's important to establish very well your requirements. So I think for me, this is probably the most important step. You have to understand what you want. You have to be clear about what you want. So what are the functional requirements of this specific component you are going to redesign? What kind of performance you expect out of that? What are the KPIs which will help you to make the decision if additive manufacturing, it's a good decision to produce this component? So you have to understand all the details. And also you have to understand all your boundaries, let's say. Okay, what materials can I use? What technologies are available for me to bring this part? You know, can I use only an FDM machine, or can I go for a SLM, SLS one? Can I print in metal? Can I print only in polymer? So depending on what you, let's say, what options you have, you will have different requirements. And this is extremely important to be established from the beginning. Knowing basically what you want, what you expect, and in this specific case, like, we have to know as well what loads are let's say acting on the components that we want to design here. So we take into account all these functional requirements. We put together with, here you see on the first step, what we call the functional parts. So the battery, all the sensors, the actuators, which will be part of this small assembly. And you see the next step, this big pink block, which is our design space. Then we can start to use topology optimization solution to guide us to discover a new design. So given this design space, the boundary conditions, the different constraints and requirements we can have, let's say objectives, the solution will help us to identify the load paths, the energy paths, and basically, based on this given design space, where we have to keep material. Okay, so topology optimization, it's an iterative process. Most of the time, you have to do multiple loops. You have to adjust your setup until you end up with a good shape. And for sure, it's important to have a validation tool working together. So you design, you do a validation until you get something which you judge as decent. So what is possible to be done as well, and I really like this example here, is if you start redesigning a part using topology optimization, for example, if you start to doing it in an X, our solution from Siemens, so it is possible to capture this, let's say, design workflow inside the solution. And you can create out of this a kind of parametric model where you can adapt the design workflow for different needs, depending on the parameters you want to use. As I said, you know what you want, you know the functional requirements, and you can transform these functional requirements in parameters inside the solution. So this means that I can adapt the dimensions for a specific attachment, the specific flange that I will have on my gripper for the different robots I have on my plant. And also this means that I can change the functional requirements, like depending on the size and the weight of different batteries that I want to move. So you can capture everything. And we have also a low-code solution that we call Mendix. So if we connect NX, capturing this design workflow inside Mendix, for example, you can easily order your, let's say, grippers from this application, from your phone, from your tablet. So you capture the workflow inside the design tool. Then, you know, working on a plant, for example, if you're responsible for the maintenance of the plant and you see that you need a new gripper, so it's easy to start the process. Okay, you have the workflow already captured. You just select the robot, you give the dimensions basically, or the requirements you have of the part you want to carry, and then the solution with this captured workflow will design and launch, send to the machine, for example, a new print job to produce a new gripper. So as I said, once we finish the design, it's extremely important to do a validation. Sometimes we cannot capture all the functional requirements on a topology optimization process. So that's why it's important to work together with a more capable simulation solution, you know, where you can then do virtual testing of your parts for the different needs or the different requirements you can have. For example, you design your part applying the loads you want, taking into account the, let's say, stress factor you want to see, you want to minimize, for example, or targeting any specific stiffness, but you cannot capture a durability requirement as part of the topology optimization. So then you can, using, in this case here, our solution, so which has everything integrated, you can just switch the module and do a durability analysis, for example. So it's very important because then you don't waste time and money producing prototypes, and testing parts which will not perform as expected. Right. So once our part is now virtual validated, so we know that this is going to deliver the expected performance, it's time also to switch to the additive manufacturing application and start to build our print job, for example. In this case, we are doing a 3D nesting on the build volume we have available from the machine that we are going to use. And you can see here, in this example, we can print maybe 2, 3 grippers, 4 grippers at the same time, let's say, at the same volume. So this also helps a lot to save production time, to minimize the leading times and so on. And within our solution, you can do all the build preparation steps needed to guarantee that your part will print first time. So you can check all the details, you can make all the assignments, you can correct positions and so on to make sure that once you generate the print job and send to the machine, everything will be printed as expected. So for sure, we are taking into account everything which is important as part of this process, all the mechanical properties of the materials we have. So yeah, we are checking and doing the 3D nesting as better as possible, to really pack the, let's say, high number of parts and so on. And you see here like nice results of these, like 35% reduction on the cost, increase on productivity and so on. And these are the things which will help you to decide about to use additive manufacturing for this specific case. Yes, investing time to redesign your parts, investing time to investigating new possibilities, but then getting extremely nice benefits in the end. Let me show you this gripper in action. You can see here, so that example, so a battery of 25 kilograms, if I'm not wrong, so being moved. So a big robot, you see. So initially, this was the gripper of 47 kilograms. So, and very precise gripper, which works very, very well, produced out of additive manufacturing. So if you have to adapt something as part of this design, it's very easy to do. Like we had situations where we had to change, for example, the angle of the cameras we have, or we have to apply a new sensor and so on. So it's easy. You just go back to your topology optimization study that you have created. You start to adapt the design to receive these new components or change the size, the weight of the components you have, and easily you have, let's say, a new design created. Also, another example, very interesting one. So bigger gripper, which is responsible to carry this battery case. You see all these orange parts were printed on an FDA machine. If I'm not wrong, it was on a Prusa machine, like a desktop machine that you can have at home. And with this kind of machines, you can, create kind of complex and industrial applications like this gripper. So you see how big this gripper is. So you can just split these in different parts, use topology optimization to guide you to discover new designs, So, and then combining with different materials, with different sections, like you see those big black rods, they are made out of carbon fiber. So you can produce very lightweight grippers and have, take out of the benefits of it on the performance of your systems. I hope this could give you some inspiration to think about how to apply additive manufacturing on your components, on your products, let's say. Thank you very much for attending this session.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Great stuff. And thanks to Anthony and Jay also. Great presentations and really impressive results from the cases presented. That's it from us. Thanks again. And we'll see you again at our next webinar in April.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Jason.